A man, infuriated that his American-born Egyptian daughters were dating American boys, decided to take his rage out on them in the most horrific way possible. For years and years, as this killer sat on the FBI's most wanted list, it seemed that we would never see a conclusion. Well, now we have. So this was actually going to be one of the first videos I ever made on this channel, and I did complete the video, but upon uploading it I got hit with some copyright claims and I just decided to kind of cut my losses and scrap it. However, at the time, this case had no ending, so maybe that was kind of a blessing in disguise, because now I feel like it's high time to get into it and cover the whole thing. So, let's look into it. Here we have the story of a man named Yaser Abdel Said. Yaser was an Egyptian man with family ties in the United States. Allegedly, in young adulthood, Yaser got into an altercation with a co-worker in Egypt. The details as to what exactly happened are a bit fuzzy, all allegations, but it is said that it ended up with Yaser running over his co-worker with his car. A few times, actually, reversing and hitting him again, killing him in the process. As a result, his family brought him to the United States to be with his large group of siblings on a student visa. He ended up working at a convenience store next to an apartment building where he would meet an American girl. Emphasis on girl. Here he met Patricia, a young, 14-year-old girl who was already dating one of his own brothers. Patricia had planned to marry this brother, but they got into a fight and broke it off. Afterwards, she soon ended up dating Yaser. At the time, she was only 15 and he was 30. At first, her family did not support the relationship and her dad said no to the marriage, but later Patricia's mother convinced him that he could take good care of her, given that they came from a very poor household and that Yaser and his family seemed to have money. After knowing each other for only a few weeks, they got married. Patricia admittedly just wanted to get out of the household. She wasn't really in love at first, but says that she grew to love him later. Her sisters strongly opposed the relationship, but they still got married either way. Immediately, they went to get Yaser a green card. During the first year of their marriage, Yaser had an affair and ended up with a daughter with a different woman. This was definitely not a great start to the marriage, but it was just one of the many red flags we've seen so far. Things continued to go downhill fast. Yaser often stated that he shouldn't have married an American, stating that they were bad people. Given that Patricia's family were Americans, he tried to get her to cut contact with them, and gradually became more successful in that endeavor. He insisted that he must be present if she talked to her family over the phone, and only on speakerphone. He told her that if she told anyone anything about their relationship, he would hurt that person. He wanted more control, and he found it. He began beating Patricia often. He would often trash the entire house in a rage and force her to clean it up. He would also often force himself on her and beat her if she refused. Despite these massive problems, the young couple rapid-fired out some kids as soon as they got married. They had a son named Islam in 1988 when Patricia was only 16 years old. In 1989, their daughter Amina was born when Patricia was 17. Amina was a bright young girl. She was very social, with her phone blowing up at all hours of the day. She was more outspoken, but also a bit more feminine, proclaiming to love the color pink. She loved martial arts and generally had a strong, positive presence. Last in 1990, when Patricia was 18, their daughter Sarah was born. Sarah was often called a tomboy. She was normally the type who stuck with jeans and sneakers. She was usually fairly quiet, but she was always smiling. She was less of a troublemaker than her siblings and was generally more academic. She was college-bound, looking forward to it and planning for it often. Little did they know, that would never come to be. By this point in the marriage, Yaser was having multiple affairs and wasn't really doing all that much to hide them. He was in and out of work, mostly out, only having worked a few months at a 7-Eleven and then a few months at a Walmart over quite a long period of time. Later, when he actually was employed, it was usually something like driving a taxi. He wouldn't keep his rage toward Patricia focused solely on her. He began beating the kids, at least Sarah and Amina anyway. In 1998, when the girls were 8 and 9 years old, the beatings would get more and more severe until the girls told a secret to their aunts, Patricia's sisters. They told them that Yaser had molested and raped both Amina and Sarah on multiple occasions. Amina told the police that her mother knew all about this for a while and, up until now, had done nothing to stop it. Patricia left Yaser, briefly, and the kids were taken to the hospital to get evaluated. It goes without saying that CPS soon became involved. However, given that the abuse hadn't taken place within a recent time frame, the medical examination couldn't turn up much. It gave the girls very little to work with, evidence-wise. They were vocal about how they were afraid of their father and his brothers, their uncles, and specifically feared they would kidnap them. So the police went out and confronted Yaser. After that, he called Patricia's family's home many times. Many times, at all hours of the day and all hours of the night, sometimes until 3 a.m., sometimes every 30 minutes. He was told to stop by the police on several occasions, but predictably to no avail. Unable to get into contact with Patricia directly, Yaser began to harass her family as well. He came to threaten them almost daily. The police were again called, and they soon aimed to arrest him for the threats. He was arrested on a charge called retaliation, but rather than for the retaliation, he then went to jail for a short time because of a mountain of unpaid traffic tickets. The girls were forced to say that they had lied about their abuse in order for the police to drop the case by both of their parents so that Yaser could stay out of jail. They did, being told to say that they lied because they wanted to live with their grandma. But the girls wrote a letter, possibly for their aunt, asking to be kept away from their father's house. Patricia ended up finding it and kept it in her closet. Their Aunt Connie was told about the letter. Somehow she got into Patricia's closet soon after and managed to retrieve the letter, taking it to CPS. Once Yaser was out of jail, Patricia went back to him and resumed their relationship immediately. They took all the kids to Maryland and then to Egypt for months, waiting for the heat to die down. Patricia claimed that she was only going along with this because she was afraid of him. However, she had many chances to get away that she didn't take. After coming back, nothing changed. As you might imagine, it only got worse. One of Sarah and Amina's cousins, who previously liked to come over to their house, stopped wanting to come over. She later said that she too had been molested by Yaser, much like Sarah and Amina. She refused to ever go back to their house from that point onwards. Amina began getting on the school bus each morning with visible injuries, such as bruises and busted lips. She admitted to close friends that these injuries were from her father and that her mother wouldn't allow her to seek medical attention for any of it. Amina and Sarah were getting about to that age where they were ready to start dating, and that's exactly what they did. Yaser, however, was undoubtedly going to be a huge problem. If they were going to meet anybody, it was going to have to be in secret, because they faced a realistic threat of violence if Yaser were to ever find out about it. In her teenage years, Amina met a boy named Joseph at her martial arts class and quickly started dating him. She was attracted to his passion in music, and the two soon became very close. They were always together whenever they could be, quite a feat for her fatherly situation. They had a very good relationship and a solid bond. Even if Yaser were likely to oppose the relationship, they were ready to tackle that problem whenever it came. At first, it was a strict secret, but after a while they opened up and told Joseph's mom about the relationship and the circumstances surrounding it. When Amina turned 16, Yaser wanted to take her to Egypt to marry her off to a man who agreed to pay a hefty price for her. He was in touch with several men who were interested in marrying her, men in their 30s and 40s. Amina didn't want to do it. She considered herself to be an American, being born and raised in American society, and was uncomfortable with the whole idea. She was told by her parents that she must marry a Muslim man, ideally an Egyptian specifically. Of course, it was mainly her father's idea, and Amina was furious that neither her mother nor the rest of her family would stand up to it. Her boyfriend Joseph had planned to marry her. They were going to go to Las Vegas and elope. He desperately wanted to save her from that family, and his mother shared the same wish. She and the rest of Joseph's family planned to help, despite their fear of Yaser retaliating. Yaser began to follow his daughters wherever they would go, and even started videotaping them. He stalked them obsessively, leading to some very, very creepy videos.
This is illegal! Do I videotape you when you're sleeping?
Hey, Yaser! Look at these eyes. If I put my eye on you.
I'm gonna get sick now. Okay, turn it off, Dad.
Nice legs. I got this. Take this blanket from this one in the back.
No!
Go.
No! Get away!
Yeah.
No! Get out!
Because
He was often reporting what he saw to his wife and his family. He had put a microphone in Amina's car and checked her mileage often. Yaser began combing through their phone records, retracing each number to see if it belonged to a male or female to the best of his ability. Amina became so paranoid because of his spying that she was afraid to talk even over public phone lines, as she thought he might have some way to be able to listen in. By this time, Sarah had gotten a job at a convenience store. She worried that her father would record her while she was working, and he did. When she got home, he would punish her for things such as smiling too much. Not even for smiling at men specifically, but for smiling at customers in general. He said that it could be taken as flirtatious, and therefore she was being a loose woman.
she can't see us from inside, right?
Oh.
Huh?
No.
She smiled to the customers.
Bubba, she has to. Part of her job.
She's in trouble.
After a while, he ultimately came to find out about Amina's relationship with Joseph. Given that the girls were absolutely forbidden to have boyfriends, especially American, non-Muslim boyfriends, he was furious. He found a letter that she was in the middle of writing to Joseph, with his name and home address clearly written. It's not known why, but he luckily seems to have failed to notice the address. Yaser quickly pulled her aside and interrogated her. She was smart, and she came up with an elaborate story on the fly. She told him that she was writing a letter to an imaginary boyfriend as she wanted that experience, but was well aware that she wasn't allowed to date. Yaser didn't really believe it, but he couldn't prove it. After this, Amina gave Joseph and his mother a picture of all her family members and urged them to be careful if they happened to see any of them. In response to the incident with the letter, Yaser picked up and moved the entire family almost overnight. Joseph's family lost contact for a very tense couple of days. They were understandably worried because they knew exactly how violent Yaser was and that he had threatened to forcibly take her back to Egypt on multiple occasions. Yaser had moved the family from Bedford, Texas to Louisville, about 20 miles away, in under 2 days. After a few days, Amina called her Taekwondo teacher, telling him where they were and asked him to deliver a message to Joseph and his mother. At first, Joseph's mother had kept the communications a secret from Joseph in order to spare him from the stress. Amina continued sending letters to Joseph's mother. She warned her, saying that Yaser wanted to kill Joseph. Yaser began to beat Amina severely and verbally abuse her at all times. While beating her, he would demand to know Joseph's full name, but she never relented and never told him. At first, Patricia denied the abuse, saying that Yaser only beat her and not the kids. She did know very well about the abuse, was asked to deny it by Yaser's family. Soon after, Amina was taken to Egypt against her will once again along with Sarah. Shortly after arriving, Yaser took her and Sarah's passports. She was able to break away briefly and emailed Joseph's mother from an internet cafe, asking what she should do. They would continue to exchange emails whenever they could. All the time, Amina begged to talk to Joseph. His mother was definitely hesitant, as Yaser had specifically expressed an intent to kill him before. But eventually she relented and they began talking once again. Amina said that she would rather die than give up what they had for someone like her father. Amina had told others that she always knew her father would kill her at some point. She became desperate and debated on killing her father with his own gun before he could kill her first. She debated on shooting herself as well. She couldn't find a path outside from the two extremes, and her mental health gradually took a heavy toll. She didn't feel she could go to any therapist, as she was still a minor and the therapist may have to tell her parents about what she said if they deemed her to be a danger to herself or others. And that was exactly what she was stressing out about in the first place. She was caught in a very rough position. On Christmas in 2007, Amina, Sarah, and their mother Patricia had all had enough and decided they needed to get out. Amina and Sarah had run to their mother at work, explaining that their father back home had flown into a rage and was waving a gun around at them. They had refused Yaser's order to accept an arranged marriage in Egypt once again, which had sent him over the edge. After returning to the United States from Egypt, Amina heavily debated on whether or not they should run away with Patricia, worried that she would only end up going back to Yaser once more. But in the end, they all ran away together. They weren't going to tell anyone where they were until they were ready, as Yaser had been threatening to kill Amina and Sarah more and more often over the preceding weeks. Sarah herself had gotten a boyfriend around this time as well. It seems that Yaser didn't know that at this point. He was already so close to the edge that this information leaking out very likely would have ended with deadly results. Patricia, Amina and her friend Eddie, and Sarah and her boyfriend Eric ran away to their Aunt Jill's house in Kansas. Eddie, Amina's friend, was kind of a red herring. Amina chose to bring him along in order to take the focus off of Joseph and protect him. It did work, as Yaser seemed to lose interest in pursuing Joseph for the time being. Patricia had told the girls that she had always wanted to run away from their father. Her family was skeptical, as she had had many chances to run away from Yaser in the past and shortly went back to him many times before this point. The girls' Aunt Jill felt that she would go back to Yaser again any time now. Unusually though, this time she told Jill that he had indeed been beating the girls and that he had threatened to kill Amina, something she had refused to admit up until this point. Patricia eventually called Yaser, supposedly to tell him that they weren't coming back. However, it later came to be revealed that this wasn't the first time that they had spoken. Patricia's phone records have shown that she was in contact with Yaser repeatedly on the 26th afterwards, one single day after they left. She was calling him non-stop behind the girls' backs, acting as if she were just as intent on leaving him behind as they were. Continuing to keep their communication secret, shortly after, Patricia took them to Tulsa, Oklahoma. They rented an apartment under a fake name so that they wouldn't be found. Eddie, needing to go back to work and feeling like things were set into place, went back to Texas to resume his normal life. He was confident that the heat had been taken off Joseph enough to where he wouldn't have to worry. The girl's older brother, Islam, was very upset and began calling Patricia's family. He said that he only wanted his mom and sisters back. He pretended that he was very sad and distraught that they had abandoned him. However, it was a trick. Yaser had told him to call them in hopes that he could get a word in and speak to them. By this time, Amina and Sarah were getting scared, knowing that their mother was predictably on track towards taking them back. They felt that her solid resolve in leaving him was wavering. The girls felt that she cared more about Yaser than their own safety and even their lives. And indeed, she took them back, just a few days after they left, secretly and against their will. Patricia said that they would go back to stay with their aunts for New Year's, promising that they wouldn't be staying with Yaser. However, her aunt never received contact from her about any of those plans. It wasn't until they were in the car on the way back to Texas that Patricia told them that they were actually going back home to Yaser. Amina, upon seeing the severity of the situation, was furious and immediately went back to stay with Eddie. Patricia went back to Yaser and told him everything about their trip and where Amina was now. Amina was in a panic. Per her aunt's advice, she had planned to run away and file a restraining order. Patricia called her all day every day at all hours, pressuring her to come back, just as Yaser tended to do. Amina naturally refused, given that he had threatened to kill her on numerous occasions and that he was only even more heated by now. But by New Year's, she caved. Patricia had gone to the house where she was staying and pounded on the door until Amina felt she had no choice but to come out and talk to her. Afterwards, Patricia took her home. Yaser asked the two girls to go out to dinner with him so they could talk. Just the three of them, Yaser, Amina, and Sarah. They drove around on the highway for a while as Yaser talked to them, never actually going anywhere to eat. Then Yaser began to pull over. He took them straight to a hotel parking lot and took his gun out of the glove box. He held it up and shot Amina at point-blank range. She died instantly, being shot twice, both shots fatal on their own. Sarah, though, wouldn't have such a quick death. Yaser aimed his gun at her and shot her 9 times. Despite her wounds, she was able to make a call to the police, all while bleeding out.
Oh my God,
on, ma'am?
I'm dying, that's what's up.
Okay, let me transfer you. I'm gonna get fire department online, okay? Hold on one sec, okay?
Yaser had not even left the area at the time. He was still loitering around the car.
Oh my god.
Irving Fire Department.
Ma'am, are you still there? Ma'am, are you still there? Why are you still there, ma'am? Ma'am, what is your address?
In the middle of the call, he opens the door to the cab, and Sarah is heard screaming one last time as he shoots her once again. Sarah died from gunshots to her lung, liver, and kidney as she bled out in the car. She was only 1/3 of a mile from a police station when her call took place. The police weren't able to trace the call, so instead they drove up and down the street for over an hour. Yaser was long gone by this point. His taxicab, leaking blood, was later found by another taxi driver in the parking lot where the violence had taken place. When the police arrived, they found 2 passports for Amina and Sarah in the car. They believe that Yaser may have planned on forcing them to go back to Egypt before things went very wrong. All involved were left completely shocked, both because of the murders, obviously, and because the family had decided to go back in the first place. None of it seemed to make any sense. The FBI, though, deemed the case to be an honor killing. An honor killing is what it's called when one family member kills another family member, almost always a woman, over bringing dishonor upon their family. These cases are mainly seen in specific areas of India, the Middle East, and North Africa. Given the circumstances and Yaser's background, it was felt that the glove fit. However, it must be noted that Yaser was not particularly religious. He wasn't ever seen praying, he didn't go to a mosque, and he didn't seem to participate in any sort of religious activity at all according to those around him. Even if he did, scholars note that there is nothing in the Quran about honor killings. It seems that he felt this way towards his daughters merely for cultural reasons. He certainly wasn't a fan of their Western lifestyle. He was also furious that they went against his orders and got boyfriends. It was no secret that he hated Americans and felt they were beneath him, so seeing that his daughters would run away with American boys was something he couldn't stomach. It's also possible that he felt he may lose his chance to marry them off and make some big bucks, but that's mere speculation. Yaser's brothers were said to be the same sort of people that he was. Patricia's family firmly believed that they were involved with getting him into hiding. Given that Yaser's father had gotten him out of his last murder back in Egypt, it wasn't a stretch by any means. One of his brothers, Yaser, had already sold off his own daughters to some men back in Egypt. Yaser is believed to have contacted his brother Mohsen after the murders, as Mohsen's wife said that they had been talking on the phone at a time that would have only been a few hours after the murders. Mohsen began to comment on the murders, saying that the girls deserved it, being whores. Patricia and Islam soon moved in with him despite this. Another brother, Yaser, is the brother that Yaser was closest to. He is also said to have contacted Yaser many times leading up to the murders. For 861 minutes in total in the week leading up to the murder, actually. A certain 12-minute phone call appeared on his phone records 3.5 hours after the murders took place. Yaser's sister, Ghada Saeed, is also wanted by the FBI. She had lost custody of her kids to her ex-husband, an American, and promptly kidnapped them and took them back to Egypt with her. Interestingly, Patricia had met up with her and her kids in Egypt, knowing what had taken place, but she never considered taking that info to the authorities until after the murders. Both Christian and Muslim funerals were held for the girls in order for the whole family to be involved. Yaser's family attended, making for an extremely tense and dark ceremony. Amina's boyfriend Joseph also attended. In the middle of grieving, Islam approached him and blamed him for their father's disappearance. There was a confrontation between the two. Ultimately, the fight was broken up and Joseph was kicked out of the funeral, adding insult to injury. Sarah and Amina's brother Islam's mind began to slip. At times he blamed their father, at times he blamed the girls. One minute he would be screaming that his father would never do this, but other times he exclaimed that his sisters deserved it all. He eventually suddenly ran off to Egypt himself with no word to those around him. Upon getting there, online, he made threats against both Patricia's family and made terroristic threats against the USA and Christians and Jews. It was believed that he was couch surfing with his uncles by this point, but there wasn't any way to know. He may have had insider information as to exactly what happened to the girls at this point, but it wasn't known for sure. Patricia's family was not happy with the way the police had handled the case. They said that the police had barely interviewed anyone on the Saeed side of the family and hadn't followed up on any reports about them. In her 911 call, Sarah wasn't asked important, critical questions about her identity or the location in which the violence was taking place. They were unhappy that the Irving police moved to keep the files on this case a secret, but that's likely because it was still an ongoing investigation. Interestingly, the girl's Aunt Jill had asked the police to look into Patricia herself. There wasn't a doubt in the family that Patricia had knowingly brought the girls back to be killed. Patricia had continued to flip back and forth between whether Yaser was a kind, loving father or whether he had abused him and threatened to kill them. She didn't show much grief, at least on camera. She would lie about every little thing. At one point she claimed to be a Muslim, and at another point she claimed to be Christian. Patricia's phone records even showed contact with Yaser after the murders. She has never admitted to any of this. There were also a number of calls made to a mysterious number in Beverly Hills, a city where Yaser is known to have connections. She also refused to take a polygraph. After the murders, she kept a very low profile, and although it was never confirmed, neighbors had reported seeing a man fitting Yaser's description at her house. Yaser soon became one of the top 10 most wanted criminals in the United States by the FBI. There was no record of him ever flying back to Egypt, at least under his real identity. The FBI believed that he might be driving a cab in New York City, where another one of his brothers lived. It was believed that his family was likely to be hiding him. Several sightings of him were reported in the New York area since the killings. The FBI came to post a $100,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. However, for the longest time, it became more and more doubtful that that would ever happen. The FBI believed that he may still be in northern Texas, hidden by his numerous connections in the area. Still though, Yaser was getting up there in years. It was quite possible that he may live a full life and die of natural causes before they ever managed to find him. For years, the police stayed on top of the investigation. One senior officer even delayed her own retirement for a number of years just to keep the investigation going. They continued to rigorously follow up on any lead they could find in the case. After being on the run since back in 2008, the police finally got a lead on where he may be. In 2017, the police actually almost caught him. He had been sighted at his son Islam's apartment, the Copper Canyon Apartments to be specific. When a maintenance worker came over to the apartment to fix the air conditioner, he recognized Yaser immediately. Upon leaving, he called the police. It's likely that Yaser had somehow realized that he had been caught. Based on where his eyeglasses had fallen and broken on the ground, it appeared that he had fled the apartment by climbing down from the second-story window and running on foot. By the time the police got a search warrant, it was already too late. He was gone. They had just narrowly missed their chance to catch him after searching for so long. For some, this raised their hopes. Now they knew that he was at least still in the area. They even knew that he might be visiting his son at any time. For others, though, it dealt a pretty good blow to their morale. They worried if this might have been their one time to catch him and that he would flee the country for good around this time. But then, in 2020, he was finally found once again. Knowing that Yaser had still had contact with his son for sure, they kept their eye on Islam even more closely than ever before. After trailing him one day, they noticed that he and Yasim, Yaser's brother, were carrying bags of food out to a house in Justin, Texas. This was a home that was listed as belonging to Islam's cousin. They stayed in the house for quite some time before leaving with what appeared to be bags of trash. Later, a light came on inside the house. The police could see the shape of a person walking back and forth between the windows. They knew that they likely had their man. After not too long, they were able to get a search warrant for this home. When the police went out to the home, it was immediately clear that they had their man. These police had been looking at his picture daily for years, after all. Yaser himself knew that the jig was up. He laid prone on the ground in front of the police. When the police caught him and restrained him, he remained silent. He was compliant and quiet. He was caught and held on charges of unlawful flight to avoid prosecution immediately so that the police wouldn't lose track of him again and could keep him in custody. It appeared to them that his son, Islam Saeed, and Yasim Saeed, his brother, had been hiding him in northern Texas for at least a number of years, just as the FBI assumed they might end up doing all those years ago. Within 2 hours of capturing him, the police came forward to inform the public that he had finally been caught. Islam Saeed went to trial and pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to conceal a person from arrest, 1 count of concealing a person from arrest, and 1 count of a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. He fully admitted to helping hide his father for all of these years. Islam was facing up to 30 years in federal prison, but ultimately he was sentenced to 10. He is serving out his sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution, Big Spring. Islam's uncle, Yaser Saeed, was convicted on similar charges of conspiring with Islam to conceal Yaser from arrest, among other crimes. Yaser was found guilty of conspiracy to conceal a person from arrest, concealing a person from arrest, and conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding as well. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. He is serving his sentence at Federal Correctional Institution, Bastrop. After those two finally got sent off to prison, Yaser Abdel Saeed's trial finally came about after so many years. During the trial, even seasoned police officers struggled to remain composed when remembering coming across the girls in the taxi that day. Many police officers who had long since retired, even some who were now living in other countries, came back to be a part of the trial and give their testimonies. When the jurors were shown some of Amina and Sarah's bloody, tattered clothing from the day of the murder, Yaser showed no emotion. It appeared that he didn't regret what he had done at all. Patricia spoke on the stand, calling Yaser a devil. Holding up 2 photos, she gave a speech talking about who her daughters were and how they had planned to lead their lives.
Both girls wanted to be doctors. They were very smart, intelligent, bright, loving, caring, and did not have an enemy in the world except their father, the devil, that killed them.
She blamed Yaser for brainwashing Islam for years, saying that it is his fault that their son was now going to rot away in prison for 10 years.
You deserve to die now, not wait in prison. Not only did you abuse our daughters, you brainwashed our son. Our son is now serving 10 years in the penitentiary because of you.
In the end, she said that she feels nothing but anger and hatred towards him, expressing that she hopes he ends up getting hurt in prison. Despite giving an emotional speech, most people in the public didn't feel much sympathy for her. Many still urged the police to investigate her further, saying that she had held at least partial blame for bringing the girls back in the first place. Many even theorized that she had blatantly set them up. As of now, it seems that the police at least don't believe this is the case. Patricia's intent behind her actions that day may forever be a mystery. Eventually, Yaser took to the stand himself, utilizing a translator. He spoke of his past, when he came to the United States, and his citizenship. Yaser said that the day played out this way. When he met his daughters that fateful day, he merely wanted to meet with them and solve a problem. He confirmed that this problem was the fact that his daughters were dating. Even so, he claimed that he did not plan to kill the girls. He only wanted to drive them around and talk to them. He felt as if he were being followed. As a result, he decided to leave the girls with the car at a nearby cab stand, feeling that whoever was following them must be their friends, giving them an opportunity to talk with them. He decided to then take a bus home from a nearby bus station. He noted that he left behind his gun and his phone with the girls, but couldn't explain why. Later on, he heard that somebody, he didn't know who, had been hurt. When he heard on TV that the police suspected him, he felt that the coverage was, quote, harsh. Yaser's lawyers stated that the police were merely out to get him because he was an Arab Muslim. They said that the girls' 2 boyfriends, after all they had done to protect the girls, likely had killed them. The prosecutors pointed out numerous holes in Yaser's story, as well as the fact that his race and religion hadn't been brought up by anyone aside from his own lawyers, and that he, not the boyfriends, had a long history of being abusive toward the girls. They pointed out that Yaser and only Yaser had been in hiding for 14 years rather than refusing to come forth and tell his side of the story. And last but not least, Sarah flat out told the police dispatcher who her killer was on the phone call that day. They replayed Sarah's phone call once more, to which Yaser showed no emotion. Then they read aloud a letter that Amina had left behind while she was on the run all those years ago. In the letter, Amina even stated that she felt her mom may be manipulated into bringing her back to her father to be killed if she took her along. However, in the end, she did take her mother along, and that is exactly what happened.
My dad began checking phone records, and he took my sister to the room. And he specifically threatened to hurt her very badly if she didn't tell me what was going on. When we were younger, he used to do things, and he's starting to hinting at doing them again. Look, I could go on forever. He has simply made our lives a nightmare. He's one man, not God. Someone should be able to stop him. He can't torment us this way. He shouldn't. Anyways, we are running away. Hopefully before the break ends. I know that he will search till he finds us. And he will, without any drama or doubt, kill us. I am worried for my mother. But she would tell him out of fear. We can't bring her, and I can only hope she doesn't get hurt. We love you, Mrs. Hopkins.
After 4 days of testimonies, nobody believed Yaser's story in the slightest. The evidence was and had always been overwhelming. After a short time, the Dallas jury unanimously found Yaser Saeed guilty of murdering both Sarah and Amina Saeed. The presiding judge sentenced Saeed to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Joseph's mother came out to speak about her relief, although being a bit overwhelmed at Yaser's arrest.
An overwhelming sense of flashbacks of Amina and Sarah. And all these years that we've been waiting for this, I don't even know if I can put it into words. It was just like a tsunami of emotions. It still is. We have good days and bad days. To say that we're ever going to recover from this, he was a teenager when this happened. And, it's going to be with him forever.
Patricia has said that she believes that the police were correct in arresting both Islam and Yasin. Her family members have also shown disgust at the fact that Islam had helped to hide the man who murdered his own sisters, father or not. Many people in the public still blame Patricia for her involvement in the murders. Going through comment sections online about the trial, it's quickly evident that many people still want Patricia to see some form of justice. And in the end, we still don't really know if it was actually Yaser that was seen in Patricia's home in the past by her neighbors. At this point, it doesn't seem that anything will be done against her. But still, in the end, this case may not be over. The police highly suspect that some other people had helped Yaser dodge the cops over the years. In fact, a federal criminal complaint says that Islam was in contact with 2 more of his father's brothers at the time of his arrest. The police may still investigate and go after these other family members. As of the making of this video, 67-year-old Yaser Abdel Saeed is incarcerated at Texas Department of Criminal Justice's McConnell Unit in B County, Texas, as are his son and brother at their own respective prisons. It is highly likely that Yaser will be there for the rest of his life, finally facing justice for what he did all the way back on that fateful night in 2008. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you don't mind, go ahead and give it a like, as it really helps me out in the algorithm, and hey, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Recently, I've started up a podcast with 4 friends, and if you're interested in this channel, I think you'll find it pretty entertaining as well. If you don't mind, go ahead and follow me on social media, as if anything were to ever happen to this channel, that would be the only way you'd ever hear about it. I also really appreciate when people follow me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are up too, and you can get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.